Hi everyone, it's Miss Hanks here, and today we're looking at urban models, which is part of Unit 6, Urban Patterns and Processes. So the first thing I want you to do is take a few minutes, and you're going to want to pause this and draw a detailed map of your town or your city. So for us, it's going to be Port Orchard or wherever it is you happen to live. This does not need to be every single street that's on there, but it needs to be the places that are important to you, the places that you go frequently, that you're aware of, your connections, and as much detail as you can in like 5 minutes maybe. So go ahead, pause the video, take a few minutes to do that, and get some good detail in there. Make sure, remember, to orient your map. So you should have that north pointing compass with all of your other directions. And if you have any symbols on there, you should have a key for yourself. Okay, so your objective today is to describe the different urban models. And we're going to look at these in some detail. They're a little bit complex. They've got some really particular parts, and you want to be able to tell the differences between them. So our tidbit of the day is that the oldest known "your mom" joke was discovered on a 3,500-year-old Babylonian tablet. This is not new. This is not limited to those of us who are alive in 2021 to tell your mom jokes. Okay, so we talked about this a bit with agriculture, but we're going to look at the bid rent curve a bit. And this really is just kind of telling us that the price and demand for real estate changes as the distance from the CBD, or the central business district, remember that one word definition, downtown, increases. So as we get farther away from the CBD, it's going to get cheaper. There's going to be less demand for the land. As we get closer, it's going to be much more expensive because there's more demand for that land. So retail wants to maximize profits, so they will pay more for land that's close to the CBD, because to maximize their profit, they need the most people there that they possibly can get. And you're going to get that in a CBD because you have people there all the time. Not going to happen so much when you're way out in the boonies and you get like 12 people there like a month. Not maximizing the profit. Also, the more accessible an area, and this is that piece I was just talking about, the more profitable. So the greater concentration of customers if we're in a more accessible area. It's way easier to get to downtown Seattle than it is to get way over to like Spokane or way over to even to Renton. Those are accessible, but not quite as much as if you're just already walking in downtown Seattle. This curve, this model is reasonable, but not entirely accurate. So remember that these things change over time. They're not perfect. Sometimes places that are farther away can be more cost effective or more profitable than places that are in the CBD. But in large part, we would still see this has quite a bit of value. And this is what it looks like if we graph it out. So the closer we are to the CBD, and that would be in our green here, we'll say this, our y-axis, is at the point, that 0 point of the CBD. Along our y-axis, we're measuring rent. If we are very close, our rent is going to be very high, and we can see that, or our payments are going to be very high. The farther we get out, the less expensive it's going to be. So you're going to want to put things that you need fairly easy access to, but also maybe that take up quite a bit of land and you don't want to pay for it right in the CBD. And then even farther out, farther we get away from it, the less expensive it's going to be, and also you have quite a bit more of it. Land close to the CBD, you just don't have that much because eventually you're not close to the CBD anymore. So very close, we're going to put usually most of our retail. It'll start to get out a little bit farther. Manufacturing anywhere from very close to quite far. Residential, again, very close to very far. And if it is closer, if it's in the CBD, residential will be fairly expensive, as will any of these. So looking specifically at some of these urban models, the first one we're going to look at is called the concentric zone model. And with concentric, you should be thinking circles. So concentric zone, it's going to come up looking rather like a bullseye. And this is created by a guy by the name of Burgess in the 1920s, and he's really specifically making it about Chicago. So we'll see quite a bit of crossover in certain cities, but it's really made to fit Chicago. So he's going to number each of the concentric zones, each of the circles, and we're going to look at them. There are 5 different ones. The first one is the CBD, that central business district, and that's going to be right at the center, and we are going to look at a model of this, so write this stuff down. The second is the zone in transition, and that is where we have industry but also some housing. So kind of this stuff that needs to be really close to the CBD, but also the housing where the poor people live. It's the people who are working in the industrial zones and can't afford to move out of those places. So really poor, low income housing, generally not going to be good quality at all. They're living where other people don't want to live because next to industrial zones is going to be very polluted, very loud, very just overall. They don't want to be there. So we see that as the zone in transition, transitioning out of the CBD into housing. The third one is the zone of the working class housing. So it's a little bit better than that very, very, very low housing. Not amazing, but passable. So we are not in transition anymore. These are people who live outside of where they work, but not far outside of where they work. So still really close, still fairly low income most of the time. Still need to be close to that industrial zone and maybe to the CBD, but a little bit farther out. Zone 4 is going to be the zone of middle class housing. And this is people often who are working in the CBD. They're making a bit more money. They have a little bit more space. We'll see that when we look at the model. We're getting out of occasional single family homes, but mostly like apartments and duplexes and things, into mostly, with this middle class housing, mostly single family homes. And then finally, we have number 5, and this is the commuter zone. These are the people who live way out and can afford to drive into work. They can afford to make that trip in there. They have much bigger houses, much bigger yards. They work in the CBD. They make more money. These are often the people who are working in the offices, business suit everyday kind of guy, people who are pretty well off and can afford to be far away from where they work. And what we would see is it looks like this. You're most often going to see this representation, but if you see it in a 3D model or to kind of help us visualize, we're seeing this. So number 1 right in the middle, and it's listed on here. This piece here, or here, this is our CBD. Zone 2, zone in transition. This is where we have, as you can see, quite a bit of quite a few large buildings and apartments and things. So people are living where they work. Lots of noise, lots of stuff going on all the time. Then that zone 3, lots and lots of slightly nicer apartments, working class housing. These are going to be a little bit better, a little bit more space in between. There is some natural landscape where there probably isn't in the zone in transition. Zone 4, middle class housing, we can see now we have like a school, we have a lot more single family homes, we have some trees. They're still fairly small yards, but the people are closer together, and occasionally we have some apartment buildings and things. And then finally that zone 5, the commuter zone, where we have much larger housing. We would have more schools, much bigger yards, lots and lots of space in between. So take some time, draw and label this. Okay, next up we have the sector model, and this is Hoyt's sector model. So it comes about in the 1940s, and it is based on Calgary in Canada. In this, Hoyt basically says cities do not develop in neat rings. It just doesn't happen. And he says that social groups form sectors or wedges coming out of the CBD. And it looks like this. So we still have kind of that circular shape, but we start to see some things where people are developing outwards. So again, in the center, we have the central business district, and then this purple zone along here. This is our transportation and industry. We'll still maybe occasionally have some houses. This would be as compared to the concentric zone model, like where we have low-income housing. This is kind of our zone in transition. We've got train tracks, lots of factories and things. Not the place where you want to live, but if you're very poor and you don't have a lot of choice, this may be the place where you live. Then we're going to have our low-class residential. That is right here. Again, quite low income, but maybe slightly more money. You don't quite live in here, but you do live right next to where you work. Very small, very tight, very crowded, but specifically residential. Then you're going to have our middle class housing, and that's going to pop out a bit more. So we got some over here where we have single family homes farther away from the industrial stuff, but still kind of next to that low income stuff. And we see the same thing over here. And then on this side, also that middle class residential, probably on the little bit lower side, lots more apartments, much closer together, lots of stuff going on. Still, it is right next to the industrial zone, but not quite that low income housing still. And then finally, we have our high class residential, which is this little wedge over here. And we see much bigger houses, large yards, lots of trees, lots of natural space, and very far away from the industrial stuff. That's usually going to be a habit, is the higher class, the higher paid you are, the farther away you want to get from the industrial stuff. Okay, so we're moving on to number 3, and this is the multiple nuclei model. This is Harrison Ullman's model from 1945, and they're going to base it on Los Angeles. So they say that cities do not have just one center of activity. There are multiple nodes or multiple nuclei. They have lots of different spaces where we have lots and lots of activity. And they say that activities are attracted and repulsed by particular nodes. And this is repulsed as in it pushes it away, not like, ugh, gross, right? Okay, so this one looks a little wonky. You kind of have a big shape like a capital D and then some other things thrown in here. So again, label it. Few of these are going to be a little bit more important than others, but label them all. Just have them on there. At least you've seen it, right? So our first one, again, big tall buildings. Right in the center, we have our central business district. Second is wholesale, and that's this purpley blue zone here. This is akin to or directly related to light manufacturing. Big warehouses, some manufacture going on, nothing super, super heavy, but it is happening. But mostly we're going to see like those big warehouse spaces. The third one is going to be low class residential, and that's these two light kind of orangey-ish spaces here and here. Again, small housing, tight, compact, right next to the manufacturing and stuff, because nobody else wants to live there and other people can afford to live farther away. Then we have our medium class residential. That's this big, huge area right here. And that's because our middle class often is one of our largest, or probably our largest class, particularly in the United States. Lots and lots of people who fall into middle class. So single family homes a lot of the time, some apartments, bigger yards, farther away from the industrial stuff, but not like way far away from everything. Then we have our high class residential, which is this piece over here, super far away from all the manufacturing, even far away from the downtown area. Some of them might work there, but most often they're actually going to work in this area. So I'm going to skip number 6 for a moment. Many of our upper class, our high class residential, and even some of our medium class residential are going to work in this area. And this is number 7, the outlying business district, because sometimes you just have business happening elsewhere. You have some node elsewhere. Circling back to number 6, we have our heavy manufacture, and that's way over here, and again right next to where we have our low class housing, our low class residential. And then we have number 8, that's our residential suburb, so a little bit outside, probably some decent sized houses, a little bit cheaper land, maybe similar to but not quite the same as this high class residential. They may work in the outlying business district, or they may work within the CBD or even one of the other places, but probably CBD or the outlying business district. Decent amount of money, can afford to buy a house, but they buy it outside of town. It's a little cheaper, but they have that commute, so there's the payoff. And then we have the industrial suburb, and that's number 9 over here. So we have it's not a suburb as in a residential area. Don't confuse this. This is where we have industry just outside of the city. So it is developing a bit outside, whatever that varying length is or distance. Okay, so we're going to get into number 4, and this is the peripheral model. And remember, think periphery, think that like outside vision. This is the stuff on the outside, and that's really, really important in this model. So this is created by a guy by the name of Harris, and it develops from like 1960 to like 1990. There's some changes that go on in here. And he is particularly developing this for the city of Detroit. And he talks about, with a peripheral model, having a highway around the city that links it to the suburbs. The suburbs are the peripheral zone, that piece outside of the city itself, linked through the highway. He says most life happens in the periphery. The CBD is still absolutely necessary, but most life is actually outside of it and in that periphery area. And it's going to look like this. So again, we see that nice circle shape. And remember, circle shape is just a model. Doesn't mean it's actually going to be a circle. It just is there to represent. So first one, we have our central city, and that's this big spot right here. That's that CBD and kind of all of the other stuff that goes along with it. Then we're going to have our suburban residential. That's this big green area all throughout here. Huge zone. Lots and lots of people living here, lots of small stuff going on, and kind of going to help link us to this highway, but also the highway is linking that periphery stuff to us. Third is like shopping. This is a retail area, and that's going to be over here and over here. Again, kind of outside of the CBD itself, within the residential suburbs, and still kind of going to be linked through the highway to some extent. I recognize that it's inside of it in this case, but still helping us to link to other places because these people have to get there somehow. Then we're going to have our industrial district, and that's this purpley zone way outside of the CBD, kind of over here in part of the housing, the part of the residential area, probably a little lower income over here, usually is if we're near industry. Then we're going to have our office park. Office park basically just means it's a place where we have offices. Lots of office type jobs outside the city, and that's our number 5, and that's what's over here. It's hard to see on this one, but it's right here. Our number 6 is the service center, and that is this piece over here. And there's all kinds of little service things going on. So you might have more of like the customer service things. You might have like I guess that's still customer service. You might have like your personal services going on. You might have like you get your car fixed and all those things. It could be any type of service, but good collection where you go and get stuff done. Then we have our airport complex. That's going to be way over here. Again, linked by this highway system because this is surrounding the city. It's going to also link out here. You don't want the airport to be super near the city because airports are really, really, really big and they're really, really loud. People don't want to live near them, so you don't want to have it right next to the city. You need all of this huge space. So it's going to be outside the city itself. And then finally, you have the combined employment and shopping center, and that's our number 8, and that's what's over here. So all of these things, stuff is going on all the time, and it is linked to the people, to the city, through this highway. And that's what makes this stuff the periphery. It's on the outside of it and linked to the inside. Okay. Then we have the urban realms model. This is created by a guy by the name of Vance in the 1960s, and he creates it based on the city of Phoenix, Arizona. So he says that cities are made up of independent regions or realms, and each one has its own CBD. And it looks something like this, which is totally wonky looking. But basically you have your central city that is a CBD, but you also have these other little realms, and each one of these is going to have its own stuff going on. So maybe we have an airport over here, we have the actual city like in here, but we have all these little edge cities. Seattle is kind of a great example of this too, where if you think there is Seattle, things change, places move. You could have a new downtown versus the old one. But we also have all of these other little cities that kind of are around it and still really part of Seattle. Renton, Kent, Kirkland, all of these different places that are just right around there, and it's really kind of hard to tell where one ends and the other begins. Okay, so looking in other places outside of North America, we have the European city model first off, and these are old cities, like in many cases ancient cities, like back in the time of the Romans. For some of them, even before that, they're really, really old. So old cities, very narrow streets, because these are streets that are made for walking and occasionally for horses. They are not made for cars. So if you have ever been to Europe and you have been on those narrow streets, this is why. They were not made for vehicles. It's also why a lot of European vehicles are super, super tiny, so they can fit on those old narrow streets. The center of European cities are often churches or some type of public square, some type of public space where people would go and gather. They'd have a market, some big deal, something public, but often the church. Wealthy people, even today, still live in the center of the cities. In the United States, in North America, we typically think of city centers as where our low-income people live, and suburbs where our higher-income people live. In European models, it's the opposite. Wealthy people live in city center near all that cool old stuff. It's cultural, it's historic, it's beautiful. They want to live near that. But the suburbs in Europe tend to have high rises, so like big tall apartment buildings and things, big tall businesses, because they don't want to ruin the historic stuff, and then they also tend to have higher crime rates than within the city itself. And basically this is what a European city model looks like. So you have the church, or whatever that public space is, in the center. You have the medieval city, the wealthy housing, the tourism, the CBD, all of that stuff is in this circle. And then you have the suburbs and the slums, where the very poorest people live on the outskirts, because you don't ruin this part. These are ancient, they are often revered. There's a lot of history and culture tied to city centers, so you don't get rid of them. And one really great example of this is Paris. So we have, essentially we can see that big circular space. This is most of our city center. Basically on the outskirts, we are going to have our suburban areas. And in this case, right in the center, we have the Louvre, we have d'Orsay, but we have cultural centers, we have public spaces, and they are all built really intentionally where they are. But if you look right here, we actually have Notre Dame. So big old historic cathedral right essentially in the center of the city. And it looks like this. So you can see here is our city center, big touristy areas, old cultural, often are medieval buildings or hundreds of years old buildings, depending. These ones are hundreds, not medieval, but really tight cultural centers. And then way far out in the distance is where we start to get into the high rises, the slums, the suburbs, stuff like that. Okay. In developing countries, we have a few different types. So Latin American cities are based on European cities most of the time. We will have a church or a plaza at the center, and that plaza really just is essentially a public square. Wealthy people live in the center, poorer people live in the periphery. This is going to combine the concentric and sector models. So in some ways really similar to the European models, in some ways really similar to some of our other North American models. We also have a CBD/industrial spine, and we're going to look at that. So it's going to look something like this. Our market with our CBD here, and then this industrial spine. So we have the cultural piece, the historic piece, all of that here with the businesses behind it or near it. And it's going to head out. We have all of this black spot here is commercial. Our market is all along here. We have more industrial area this way. This is our mature old cultural zone here. This is gentrification, so people who have taken the old stuff that was run down and made it new and like really highly desirable, and usually take the prices way, way, way up and kick the people who used to live there out. We have our middle class tract here. We have our elite residential sector here because it's really close to the cultural part and generally considered like really highly desirable. And then we have this is going to be where kind of our slums are over here. And then here we just kind of have a little bit of everything. But if you see this one, notice it looks kind of like a keyhole. That's our Latin American city model. And Mexico City is a good example of this. Flip it sideways because it's not set up that way, but our plaza right in the center, our industrial spine going down, our cultural spine going this way, our cultural piece, and then residential as we get further out with high-class residential close by. And it looks like this. This is our church and our central area. So you can see there is the CBD type over here, the industrial-ish or businessy offices, and then kind of a little bit less so on this side. Okay. In Southeast Asia, we have cities that generally don't have a clear CBD. These are cities that kind of crop up over time. They pop up where they can afford to, and largely they pop up near water so that things can ship out. So they just kind of expand, and when one thing gets run down, something new is built outside of it. So usually the center is the old colonial port. The growth is very uneven. Where is their money at whatever time? Where is something run down? And they have to replace it, and they just go outwards. So we see something that looks like this. You have your port area, you have your mixed land use, and this often is kind of our CBD-ish area. We may have our rich people living here, our middle class people living here, our poor people living as the farther out we can go, and then industrial zones keep going out and out and out. So bigger the city gets, the farther out those are going to go. And Ho Chi Minh or Saigon is a good example of this. So right along the river, and then we're going to have our CBD, all of our big kind of important businessy stuff close by, residential, high-class residential close by, and then the farther out we get, the lower income it's going to get, and the more industrial stuff we're going to find. And this is what we would see. So right along the river, because a river is essentially a road. It is transportation. It is how we get our goods out to someone who wants to buy them. And then we have the Sub-Saharan Africa city model. So we often will see 3 CBDs in this type of model. We'll have the colonial one, we'll have the traditional one, and then we'll have the market. So that's going to be our most current use. These tend to be Sub-Saharan Africa tends to be our least urbanized region. We have much more rural space, but we often are going to see, our biggest cities in Africa were set up by Europeans. So we get these multiple pieces. That's where our colonial aspects of the city, but we're also going to get the traditional aspects in, and then we'll have those marketplaces. And this is something what it would look like. So this is our CBD, colonial, very organized, extremely regimented. This why we show it in squares. Streets all make very logical, geometric sense. Everything is set up very, very particularly. Then we have our market zone over here, and this essentially is going to be like people have stuff to sell, they come in and they sell it. They go near where other people are. And then our traditional CBD over here, kind of in response to or alongside the colonial CBD. This is going to often end up being more for the colonizers. This is going to be more for the locals as it builds. So we see our neighborhoods all around, ethnic neighborhoods really close, especially on the market zone side, ethnic and mixed neighborhoods along the colonial traditional side. We'll see some informal townships, the satellite towns that kind of crop up in response to the city itself, or all along the outside. And then along the outside of the ethnic neighborhoods, we're going to have mining and manufacturing. So this tends to be the poorer side, which is why we don't see a lot of mixed neighborhoods over here, and also why we see that mining and manufacturing, because these people often work in here or they're selling over here. And Dar es Salaam is a really good example of this. All right, so I want you to take a couple minutes. We are done taking notes, but I want you to take a couple minutes, write in your notes, talk about how the world is becoming more and more urbanized, but particularly you want to think about which urban model will allow for the growth of the cities most effectively and why. So, sorry, I misspoke. This is really what I want you to write about. So, summary of the day. Describe the population distribution, how the population distributions differ for the various urban models, and explain how the models in developing countries are different from those in Europe and North America. And that is it for today. So make sure you are reading in your text. Make sure you go back and check anything that you missed, and have a great day. Bye.